What do you think keeps people from really taking action on a true passion and trying to, grow a career based on that in their lives?
I think the devil's in the details. And I think ourselves and our own insecurity and our own self-worth get in the way of our success, One thing that I had to figure out for myself was like being comfortable with who I am. And it wasn't even being comfortable with who I am, but in order to get to that point, I had to realize whose I was. And once I figured that out, I feel like that's the switch.
What's going on, and welcome to the Take a Step podcast. I'm your host, Josh Johnston, founder of Take a Step. It's a community that's focused on bringing together like-minded individuals who are all purpose-driven towards taking action to maximize their God-given potential. If you find value in this podcast, please leave a rating and review on whichever platform you're listening. It really helps us to continue to grow this community and change more lives for the better. Feel free to give me a follow on social media at __take a step __, and reach out to me if you have any questions or just want to connect. With that being said, let's dive in. Welcome back to another episode of the Take a Step podcast. We have got a special guest today, one of my good buddies and someone whose perspective I really trust, and just has a great outlook on life, and I'm excited for everybody to kind of get to know him, hopefully take something away from it. So we've got Mr. Greg Goad on the podcast today. Greg, thank you for joining.
Thanks, Josh. I am super stoked to be here. We're recording on a Wednesday morning. It's 7:30. My kids just left the house. My wife just left the house. So it's just me, you, this cup of coffee, and the dog that's asleep right behind me. So
I love it.
A little bit about me. I'm 39 years old. I live in Canton, Georgia. Married to my wife. It'll be 10 years in September. We've got 2 young kids. We've got a 6-year-old little girl named Lily, and we've got a 3-year-old little boy named Sage. And we got a fur baby named Jack. Jack's my old man. He's my yellow lab who's like almost 12. I guess he's 12 years old this year. And nice. I'm in real estate.
Love it. Love it. I like the setup you're working with. You got you look professional with the, you got the neon in the back. You got the lighting right. I love it.
Yeah, so I definitely had a lot of help with that. I cannot take credit. I definitely envisioned it, right? And I went to the people that I knew were already doing these type of things, like podcasts and YouTube channels. And I was like, that's what I want. I went to my contractor and I said, hey, this is what I'm looking for. So I got the barnwood backdrop, got some floating shelves, ordered this neon off Amazon, and then my light setup I got from my videographer. I was like, hey, I'm going to start shooting YouTube. I'm going to create a studio in my basement. What do I buy? And he literally sent me an Amazon buy list, and I just bought it.
I love that. Yeah, I'd love to dive into that a little bit. So you're in real estate. I obviously, I see all of your, social media stuff, and I think it's so cool to see how people take what they have a passion for in the business world and really, work to promote it and build a personal brand out of it. And that's what I see that journey that you're on. And I'd love to talk a little bit just about, what got you into real estate, what you love about it, and just this journey that of kind of differentiating yourself and creating content and building that brand from a social perspective.
Yeah, so that's a big, long question with lots of answers. So I'm going to try to compress it as much as I can. So I fell into real estate. It wasn't one of those things that I was like, man, I just dream of selling houses and creating this huge, massive success and wealth in real estate. Like, that was just nothing that was ever in my mind or on my radar, really. I had a couple people along the way say, hey, you should think about real estate. A little bit about me. I was in the food and beverage and the customer service industry for 15 plus years. So I was bartending, waiting tables, working back of the house, working front of the house. I was in landscaping for a while. I was a foreman in the landscaping world too. So I was dealing with customers all the time, making sure their yards were right, and then hardscapes too. So I've done all kinds of different customer service jobs. So I've always had a couple people here and there be like, hey, you should check out this whole real estate thing. And so my wife and I were living in Big Sky, Montana, and we had just gotten married in 2015, and we had just gotten back from our honeymoon. And when you fly into Bozeman to drive to Big Sky, it's about an hour drive. And we did a delayed honeymoon because we both worked these seasonal jobs at these big bougie resorts in Big Sky. And, you know, so we had a month and a half off like every 6 months, right? And so we went on our honeymoon, we came back, we're halfway home, right? And I look over and she is just like bawling, like losing her noodles. And I was just like, what's wrong? She's like, I can't, you know, I can't just vision myself raising a family here. I can't envision myself, you know, being so far from my family, and I'm homesick. I want to move back to Kennesaw, you know, Northwest Atlanta. And for me, you know, I grew up in Augusta, and I had always had these huge dreams. I made my first trip out west at when I was 17 years old. We drove across country from Augusta in a Sequoia with my stepbrothers and sisters, my mom and my stepdad. And I'll never forget pulling into Yellowstone National Park and just being in awe, right? And then, you know, I just kind of fell in love with the West at that point. We went to the Tetons too. So like, I mean, if you've ever been there, Jackson Hole is amazing. Teton National Park is just breathtaking. So I fell in love. So I always had this like, I want to be out west, right? I love mountain sports. I like to ski. I like to mountain bike. You know, I like to hike. I like to do everything outside. So for me, I was just like a deer in the headlights. You know, part of me was like angry. Part of me was like, oh crap. And then part of me was just like, well, if I want to stay married, I need to figure something out. Because we had just gotten married. Now, granted, we had been together a long, long time. But, so fast forward just a little bit. I went to a men's sobriety workshop called the Atlanta Men's Workshop that's in Rock Eagle. It's a 4-H camp outside of Madison, Georgia. And one of my longtime friends that we'll get into this too, but I've been sober a long time. One of my long time friends in recovery, we had both come out of like the Friday night speaker meeting. I hadn't seen him in a couple years. He's like, bro, what's up? And I was like, dude, what's going on? So we kind of like peeled off, found a picnic bench, and just like set up shop and had like the catch-up meeting. Yeah. And we got all the surface stuff out of the way, you know, like, and then, you know, he leans in and he says, so how you really doing? You know, as a good friend that, you know, someone that's, you know, a faithful brother in Christ, someone that's, you know, sober in recovery also. So it was just like, well, that, you know. Yeah.
Isn't it funny how just like guys, you know, you can tell, you're like, all right, this is surface level. Let's like, tell me what's really going on.
What's really going on. Yeah. So it's like, okay, I'm glad those things are good. Now what's really happening? You know, what's really like heavy on your heart? And I just unloaded, and he was just like, and he had known me before, and we were in a book study together once a week. So like, we knew each other very well. Like I knew him when he was single, and now he's married with 2 young kids also, you know? And, he just said very point blank, so move back. And I was just like, not expecting that answer. I was looking for validation. I was looking for someone to say, bro, no, you got to fight that. You know, that's what I was hoping, you know, but that's not what I found. And what I really got was an invitation. And John said, we need you. And I was like, we need you. And he's like, we need you in the rooms of recovery, and we need you in our church family. And dude, I had never had like a legitimate like invitation like that in the community. And I was just kind of like, boo, okay. Like instantly, Holy Spirit was like, boom, okay. And I was like, all right. And at that point, he was like, so what are you going to do when you move back? And I was like, bro, I don't know. I've done one of 100 different things. I have no idea. And he was like, would you ever want to go into real estate? And I said, well, funny you should ask that. I've had several people over the course of, you know, my professional, you know, career in F&B and all the other different things that I've done before. So yeah, he was like, well, I'm a broker. I own my own brokerage, and I've been in the real estate realm for 16 plus years. I would love to work with you, show you the business. I'll pay you a small salary. I've got a client that I can put you on, and we'll split each deal 50-50 that we get for that client. And this was a hedge fund, a corporate hedge fund that was buying homes in Metro Atlanta. And I just said yes, you know. Now fast forward the tape, like that didn't happen. We didn't move for another year. So I put some stipulations. I tried to guard my last year in Montana. So, not having a degree or anything, and Lauren has a bachelor's degree from the University of Georgia. And, so I knew she was going to have an easier job getting like the corporate job with the insurance and all that kind of stuff. And so I was like, hey, I'm game to move back, but you got to get a job first. So I was able to squirrel away another, 10 or 11 months in Big Sky. So I skied my face off. I think I skied 102 days that winter. I think I fished just as many days. One of my best friends taught me how to fly fish out there. So every weekend we were in a drift boat, camping, wading around, fishing, little creek streams up in the mountains. Like, I just stayed busy doing recreation for that last year. But so there's the short answer. Yeah,
no, I mean, it's so cool to just kind of see how something you weren't expecting just kind of like hit you, and it was just like, all right, like this is obvious. And like, I guess for you, like having your foundation and your roots planted out there, what was your, like, what scared you the most about moving back?
So I've been living in this, like, very much like do what feels good right now, very self-centered. Very selfish, but in the fact of like, hey, I'm selfish because it's like, I know we only get one life to live, and I have an opportunity to live and work in a place that literally is magical. I love Montana. I love the mountains. I love, a lot of people don't love the weather. I love the weather. I love the extreme weather that we got. I mean, there were usually a couple weeks out of the year it'd be like -40, and I was just like, this is so weird and cool. I dig it,
Yeah.
And then, like, in the summertime, like, instead of, like, here in Georgia, because I grew up in Augusta, our summers are, like, 3 or 4 months, really, Out there, it's only 2 months, but it's, like, perfect. It's, like, hey, during the daytime, it's 80 to 85, and at night, it gets into, like, the low 60s.
Yeah.
It's, like, perfect. Like, you can camp in July. You can't camp in July unless you're in an RV or a motorhome in Georgia.
Very true.
Unless you're just insane and you just like to sweat.
Yeah. I was gonna say I think me and one of my buddies who knows you as well, I was like, you embody what it looks like to be from Montana. Like if someone would say, hey, draw me a picture of someone that lives in Montana, it would be Greg Goad, 100%.
Well, what's funny is it's usually two types of people pop up: is a cowboy and a ski bum.
Yeah, I have one of my other good buddies went out to work. He went out to Wyoming, but almost in Montana to work at one of those resort style ranches, and he was a ranch hand. So yeah, it's either cowboys or ski heads.
Yeah, that's funny.
Awesome. But yeah, it's just like, and kind of going more into how you've really grown in the real estate industry. Like, I see all the content you put out. I kind of see how you're really taking initiative and building that brand from a social media perspective. And I've seen so much great stuff recently on, if you have a passion for an industry, start making content, start getting yourself out there, because the more people see your face, the more people see your brand, the more trust you build, and the more trust you build with people, the more likely there'll be clients down the road. And I think that's such a cool concept, and I see the hard push that you do at what's it, Greg Home Partners, right?
Yeah, it's Goad Home Partners, and then my YouTube channel is Greg Goad Best Life Atlanta.
Awesome.
I'm with a small, well, it's not small anymore. It's a large national brokerage called Real Broker,
yeah.
And it's primarily a tech-run company. But I wasn't always with Real. I was with John for 5 years out of the 8 years I've been in business, and pretty much my start into content was, I was like you. I was serving it inside out as a small group leader, and
just for the people that don't know, what is Inside Out?
So Inside Out is the high school ministry across the board for all the North Point ministry sister churches. Mm-hmm. So Josh and I go to Woodstock City Church currently. He is actually an Inside Out leader, and I am actually a coach for the freshman crew. So that's how we met initially. But I was on the opposite role of that. I was leading a small group, and we were having a leader huddle, and this guy just comes up to me, and I had met him a couple times, but I didn't know what he did. He didn't know what I did, but he found out, I guess, through Facebook or Instagram or social media. He's like, hey, I see you're in real estate. We should grab lunch. I'm in marketing in real estate. And I was like, all right, cool. So we sat down. He was like, dude, have you ever thought about doing video? And I really hadn't. Like, you know, this was in 2020, like 2019, 2020, like right before COVID, like before the world went bananas. And I got introduced to like cinematic listing videos. And he showed me this guy in Canada. His name is Brad McCollum. And the funny thing is, Brad and I are actually really good friends now. But at the time, my friend shows me this YouTube video of this guy with like cool looking hair and glasses and like just regular clothes. But like high energy, showing off the house, talking about the house. It was like if MTV Cribs and like Paramount like made a listing video, like all rolled into one. And I was like, man, that's really cool. And you know, I think maybe not everybody, but definitely me, I definitely look back to like childhood and like for whatever reason, like if I become an actor, I have made it, right? Like we have this like little like dream in the back of our minds, maybe one day I'll be on a movie or something like that, you know? So I've always been very inquisitive of video and content and that kind of stuff. So once I saw this style of video, I was like, this was a big misconception, but it was good though. I thought that I had to have this like amazing luxury listing that was worthy of a video, right? And during COVID, I got a call. It was from one of my good friends, and I had helped him and his new bride buy a house they were expecting. And his mom was from West Georgia, and she was a very prominent business owner in that town. Owned real estate all over the state of Georgia, commercial and residential. And she had just built this like magnificent, like custom, like primarily like a tree house. And but for whatever reason, she tried to live in it. She didn't like it, and she's like, I'm just gonna sell it. And Miles called me and was like, yo, like, Mom wants to sell this house that she just built. Give her a buzz. She's expecting your call. So I call her, and she's like, yeah, come down, come see it. And so I go down to meet with her to do like a listing consult. And I knew this was my opportunity because I knew this was like a very, very custom house. So we sat down, we had lunch, and I said, hey, your home deserves this. And I showed her one of Brad's videos, and she was like, if you do that, you have this listing right now, I'll sign whatever.
Nice.
And I was like, let's go. Now, granted, I didn't have a videographer. I didn't know how it was all going to happen. I just know we were going to do it.
So you've never done one before at that point?
Nope. Nothing.
Love it.
Absolutely nothing. And thus began my journey. And I called around to some people that I had heard of in the city that did videos and stuff. Some people I wouldn't get a call back. Some people called back and they had these astronomical numbers, and I was like, yo, like I don't make that kind of money. You know, I was like, it was like, you know, I think the one quote I had was like $3,000, and I was just like, for one little video? And I was just like dumbfounded. Yeah. So then like my solution brain kicked in. I was like, who do you know? It's not what you know, it's who do you know at that point. So it's like I start connecting the dots. And at this time in my life, I was in one of the men's leadership groups at Woodstock City. And one of the guys in our group's son was a volunteer on production in the main auditorium. And I was like, man, I should call him, because it's a very cool family, you know. This guy and his wife, they only had one young son, and you know, he's a teenager. They're very outdoorsy, so like they mountain bike. They live in ball ground on a couple of acres. He's a business owner, so I look up to the guy, you know. And his kid's a shredder on a mountain bike too. So I call him. I was like, hey, I have this idea, and I'm trying to source a video guy to shoot this video. Do you think Ashton would be into it? And he said, dude, he would crush this first off, and he would be honored. Let me make a phone call, and then I'll pass it off to y'all, and y'all just have at it. And we ended up meeting up, and we went over for a bike ride over at Blankets Creek. I pitched him on, like, hey, what I wanted to do. I showed him one of Brad's videos. He was like, we 100% can do that. We're going to need a second shooter, though. And I was like, okay, well, what does that look like? And he was like, I have one of my buddies that can help us out. And then at this time, the church would let young guys like that, not necessarily rent, but like, use some of the equipment to go out and do some things. And that since then, that has been totally shut down. That isn't allowed anymore. But, so we went out and we shot this listing video. And it was crazy. So we shoot the video, I get the edit back, I put it on Facebook and I put it on YouTube, and I could not believe the response I got. So within a week, I had gotten 60,000 views on Facebook. I'd gotten 17,000 views on YouTube. And the way views work on YouTube and the way views work on Facebook are two totally different things. Like, you have to hang out for at least 2 minutes on YouTube for it to be counted as a view. With Facebook, it's like 30 seconds, right? And that certainly could have changed since then too, and it probably has. But my mind went to, holy smokes, I just filled State Farm Arena. And I was dumbfounded at that point, because, man, it just, like, my blood just went wild. My heart went crazy. And I was just like, this is it. This is the future of our business. And then I started thinking, I was like, well, I don't have listings like this every day. What should I do? And then, like, going into, like, producing different styles and different types of content started to come to mind. So I was like, well, I could do a community series. So then I started, like, a community series where I would go out and I would bring my video guys, and we would sit down and interview, like, whether it be a nonprofit or a local small business. And I would just ask them 3 questions, hey, how'd you get in business? Give me the 120-second, like, quick answer. And then, like, what are you doing for the community? And then the second part of that question was, well, what has the community done for you, right? Which is always a great, like, because then you get to see really someone's heart, and it's awesome to see, like, whatever their response is. Because they're just, I try to prep them, but sometimes I kind of slide that one in there.
Yeah.
And then the last one's always, like, something fun, like, hey, like, for the donut shop, what's your favorite type of donut, like, and so I started producing that kind of content. But the other thing that clicked too during that video, because I had this misconception that I needed to be, like, when I would go to a closing, I would need to be, like, dapper, like, suit, like, hair's, like, perfect, like, all totally put together. Like,
I can only imagine what your perfect hair is.
Well, it's just a ponytail is what it is. It's just washed, brushed, and a ponytail. Yeah, that's primarily it. Or it's up in a bun,
Gotcha.
Which is typically what it was. But I started thinking about that, and in that video, I wasn't that. I was just literally, I come walking out of a coffee shop. I've got a hat on backwards. I've got a flannel shirt, jeans, and Hey Dudes. And I have a cup of coffee, and I hop on my one wheel, and I one wheel through town, and then it cuts to me one wheeling up the ramp to this house. And I do this crib-style walkthrough tour. And what I realized is, I just need to be me.
Yeah. Amen.
I'm thinking about that whole stadium that I filled with people in my mind, and I'm like, they didn't see some guy hopping out of a luxury vehicle with, a sport coat. They saw some bro dude walk out of a coffee shop and hop on a one wheel, and it just, like, it changed my whole mentality and my whole, like, everything. Like, I used to wear a suit to closings. Like, I don't do that anymore, when I show up to someone I've never met, like, I wear, like, probably what I'm having, I've got, like, a Howler Brothers, like, hoodie with, like, my hat and some 511 khakis.
Yeah.
It's like, I guess they're not khakis. They're, like, tactical pants or whatever.
I love it. No, man, there's a lot to unpack with all of that. And, like, first I want to go back to, when you were given the opportunity to shoot that video for that house, and, even further back when you were first presented with, like, what creating content would even do, how to do it. And you were like, I don't feel like I'm worthy yet. I don't feel like I have the quality real estate to offer yet. And then when I get that, all right, I don't have, I don't know who to go to. I don't have the equipment. I don't have the skills, but all it took was an opportunity. And there's something so powerful with that, because I think so many people, whether if it's real estate, whether if it's their career, whether if it's a relationship, whether if it's their physical health, there can be something presented as an opportunity that deters people from getting started, because what they see as perfection is so daunting, because it seems like miles away. Mm-hmm. They don't know how to do it. Right. And that can keep people from getting started. But if you can just, if there's an opportunity, especially when you're at the, at the ground building up, if you can just, master the ability to say yes and just start and say, you know what, I don't know how I'm going to do it. I don't know, the steps I'm going to take. But if I can just, generate a little bit of momentum and get started, I'll figure it out from there.
I mean, just the fact that I went on and created a YouTube account, which I had to scratch and like put in the grave when I switched brokerages, because my old brokerage email was attached to the YouTube channel and they wouldn't let me switch it. But then again, like, I didn't know anything about YouTube. I knew it needed to go there, but I'd never created this. I didn't have anybody in my direct sphere that was doing YouTube. Like, it was just like a trial by fire. I was like, okay, I got this video. I need to do something with it. And I was like, oh, I'm going to do it. I'm going to put it on YouTube, And then, I was like, I'm going to put it on Facebook. And that was it, And it was, I just figured it out. And like, I think the other thing that I did too is like, I went back again. It's not what I know, it's who I know, right? So it's reaching out to people that may have done this in the past. And, I joined some Facebook groups. And then later on, that's how I actually ended up joining Real Broker, because Brad, the guy I was talking about, and one of his buddies, Bob Tompkins, reached out to me. We had created a friendship online, in the video world and the content creators. And when they reached out to me and they said, hey, we're going to build a community of content creators in a national brokerage, I was just like, do what? Like, sign me up for that.
Seriously.
Like it really didn't take a whole lot. I literally, like, they pitched me on the opportunity and like what they want, because it's a partnership, with the way our brokerage is set up. And, I sat down with a bunch of mountain bike dudes for lunch, and it was a CPA and 2 engineers and me. I'm the only sales guys at the table. You know what I mean? And I tell them, the numbers, the splits, the stock option, the revenue share, and then I told them about the community. And the CPA just like instantly after I told him all the numbers, he was like, so what are you scared of? He was like, the numbers work, but what are you scared of? And in that moment, I was scared of success. And that was the encouragement that I needed from my peers to be like, I need to do this, And when I did, what I found was I did find those video community guys, right? I found guys in San Diego. I found guys in Austin. I found guys in Florida. I found guys in New York City. I found guys in South Carolina, literally across the country, like coast to coast, that were doing the same thing I'm doing, and some were like several seasons ahead in their video journey. Some were a couple steps ahead. Some were in the same, and then some were like just beginning. But this community was created, and that's when I started to realize, like, oh, hey, now I can do not just community series like with other people. Now I can start to talk about stuff in different townships and about the county and about the market, and I can start to become the community person, right, that knows about the different communities within Metro Atlanta. Yeah. And that's when things really started to unpack for me. And that first year when I joined that brokerage, I was averaging, before that point, I was averaging anywhere from 20 to 25 homes a year. And that's a good living. Like, that's a 6-figure living. That's nothing to sneeze at, And I went out and sold 50 homes that year. I doubled what I was doing in production.
What do you attribute that to the most? Just obviously, like, content creation brings so many different opportunities to the table. But what specifically do you think from that generated, a 2x in your numbers in just 1 year?
So I attribute it to community, because even I go back and track those 50 people that transacted with us that year. families or people that were buying homes, and they were all people from my sphere or 1 degree removed. Mm-hmm. So what I also figured out was this is like, I didn't need to go viral, because I'm not going to sell stuff in other states, or even because, with real estate, and a lot of people don't realize this, is like we have these things called MLSs, and the MLS is the multiple listing service. And here in Atlanta alone, we have 2. We have Georgia MLS and FMLS, right? And then once you go to the mountains, you got a different one. Once you go south, you got a different one. Once you go west, you got a different one. And literally each town in the state of Georgia has its own MLS. So, with that being said, like, I had to figure out what I was going to do, and I had to figure out that, with what I was doing, like, the video content was, like, local, right? It was local to the, like, Cherokee, Cobb, like, parts of Fulton County that I service. Even on up into Jasper, I saw a handful up in the mountains every year, it seems, a couple of listings. Listings are easier to maintain from a distance, so, like, usually I only have to go to the house a couple times. Like, I'll go do the initial walkthrough, check it out. I'll do, we'll go through a checklist on what needs to happen. But ultimately, that local content puts me in front of my local sphere, right? So I'm in different types of communities, just like we talked about like earlier. Like Inside Out was a big community for me, If you think about it, it's like a lot of people go to these big networking events and all that kind of stuff. And, because I've been sober for so long, I've been so community driven, it's like I go where my people are, know, and I go where I'm called, like I've been a believer long enough. Like when the Spirit like nudges you, I just go. I've learned that over the years, and it's just paying attention to that and trusting that, and like, it's never failed me. I've always walked into whatever, if I have that feeling and the Holy Spirit's like nudging me, like the outcome's always way better than I could have done it.
Yeah, for sure.
So what happens is I create that social content for my community, right? So I've got an outdoor recreation community through mountain biking and other families that like to go out, and other guys that like to go out and recreate, whether it be mountain biking, fly fishing, hiking, just anything outside. The Inside Out community, like you and I are in, that's another community that I'm involved in. And then, my recovery community too. I've been sober for over 16 years now. So like I'm known as like the guy in the rooms of AA that can like help you buy a house, So I have these 3 different buckets of people that I pull from. That's who people that want to buy houses with me, because at the end of the day, no one's going to buy a house with you if they don't like, know, and trust you, right? Or they have somebody that's direct, 1 degree removed, whether it be a brother, a sister, or a best friend, that says, hey, here's Greg. He helped me buy and sell a house, and my sister and my mom, and you're going to love him. Like when you get those kind of referrals, like that's how you're able to multiply like it did. And, it helped that what I did was I figured out that I didn't need to go viral, first off. I just need to hit the people that I was already connected with. Because, okay, so those are 3 different types of people, and across 3 different seasons of life, too. And you think about, like, okay, how can I stay in touch with thousands of people at one time? You can't. Mm-hmm. Well, today we can with social media, right? And I had to figure out content that wasn't salesy, because I'm not salesy, you know? And I feel like we're in a day and age where it's like, dude, I do not want to be sold to. Like, we have been sold to our entire lives. Like, from the point of, like, when we were watching cartoons as kids to today being on Instagram. You know what I mean? I don't know how many things I have in my house that I have, like, impulse bought because it was on Instagram. You know what I mean?
I feel you.
I know you do. That's why you're laughing.
Yeah, definitely. No, but, like, in getting back to that, we want people that can relate to us, right? And I think that's what you were getting at earlier when you were talking about, just being yourself through your content, not feeling like you have to put on this suit and, be this scripted person.
Correct.
But just be yourself. And I think that, that leads to organic growth, because let's just say you try to be someone you're not. How sustainable is that business model for you personally? And if you're presenting a fake version of what your business truly is. Like you want people to join and partner with you who are doing it because it's you, not because it's someone you think you're supposed to be.
Right. And, you know, what happens is that's when the burnout really happens, you know, because like you're put on stage, like you're acting. You have to act every single day, you know, and you're trying to act this part. And if you do it for too long, that's when people, they burn out, they quit the business because they're trying to be that luxury agent. And the reality is like, dude, that's like getting into the NBA. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there's maybe a dozen agents out of the greater Atlanta metro area that are selling multi-million-dollar houses every day. You know, out of 100,000 agents in the state of Georgia. When you think about that.
Yeah.
Like that's
wild.
Very small percentage of people, you know, and you know, it's just, it's not realistic, but at the end of the day, it's like, you know, am I called to sell luxury real estate? I don't know. If one comes across my desk, I will certainly sell it, you know, and I have the marketing and the ability to sell that, you know, but is that my bread and butter and that's my everyday? No. My everyday client is usually, it's a family, and they're usually selling their first house, going to the 10 to 15 year house, you know, or it's someone's elderly parent who's downsizing or has passed. You know, last year was a crazy year, and you know, rates got really higher than they've been in 20 plus years.
Trust me, I know.
And yeah, you bought a house last year. And with that being said, like, you know, the only people that were transacting at that point were people that were, you know, death, divorce, downsize, diamonds, and babies. Like those are the people that had these life circumstances that were happening. So like last year, I think I dealt with like 3 or 4 different divorce cases where like, and these aren't like random people. These are people I know. So it was like even more like tough to like walk through that with them. But then you also have, you know, parents that are passing away, you know, and then you're dealing with, if they didn't do the deed right, there was a probate. I had a deal last year where it was a couple that found me. It was a friend of mine whose dad's mom was moved into like an Alzheimer's like facility. Right. And, but the dad had passed away like 10 years prior. Not till we're under contract and running title will we find out that dad is still on title. Right. And the way that they had deeded the house, it had to go through probate. This house was an active transaction for 9 months while we figured that out. And luckily, because I had sold the buyer's house. And it was kind of a wild transaction because like it was, these people called me from my sign, and you know, we get a lot of that when we put your sign in the yard, people just call you, right? And you never know what you're gonna get. And this couple said, hey, we'd love to see the house. We're unrepresented. Would you meet us? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. So pull up, meet them. Nice couple, super sweet. We toured, and this is like a little 2-bedroom, 2-bath, like attached, like small, like ranch style condo, right? Not far off Barrett Parkway. Nice area, Marietta. And they said, we'll take it. I said, okay. How are you going to buy it? You know, like, are you getting a loan? Do you have cash? Like, you'll take it. Okay, cool. I'll write it up. We'll figure it out. And they said, well, we have a house to sell. Can you come see it? I was like, well, yeah. They were like, what are you doing this afternoon? I was like, I guess I'm coming to your house. Yeah. And they're like, okay, that works. So I go over, I see their house. It's in East Cobb. It's in the right school district. It's meticulously maintained. It's got a pool. It's got all these updates. Like, it's awesome. I'm thinking, like, as soon as I walk in, I'm like, this video is going to be sick. Yeah. You know, as I'm walking through this house. So I sell their house, right? Multiple offer situation. We get all kinds of traction on it. And, so literally, we're like 2 weeks from close, and they're supposed to be moving out of their house, and then this whole like deed title thing comes up, and then we're just like, well, what do we do? And what we ended up doing was a temporary occupancy agreement pre-close. So they actually moved into the house before it closed and lived in the house for 8 months before it actually finally closed.
Wow.
But those are the things that we dealt with last year, right? And those are the things where we learn about probate, and we learn about why do you get a lawyer when you go to probate. You just don't let it float around in there, you know? But anyways, I digress. I got off topic.
No, I mean, it's just cool to kind of see how just saying yes to different situations, creates opportunities, and then you just, you figure it out. You figure it out, and then, let's just say worst case scenario, it ends up being a bust. Well, now next time a situation like that happens, it's not a net negative, it's a net positive, because you can build off of that moving forward for whenever those situations occur. So yeah, I love that. And, just kind of transitioning forward, you've talked a lot about, community, your faith. You referenced kind of the sobriety community that really, kind of got your step in with building that relationship that got you into real estate.
Right.
And I want to kind of dig into, what got you into the sobriety community. So
sure,
for you, and I want you to, be as, brief as you want, go in depth as you want, but just kind of talk about your background
so many
with
times
that.
I could do it, eyes closed, upside down, falling out of a plane. It's just like, and it's part of my journey, and it's part of who I am, and it's part of why God has given me this ability, is because He's given me experience to help other people, to create light in a dark space, right? For me, I got sober at 22 years old. It was 2007. Most of my friends were graduating college. Some were getting married. Some were getting career jobs and buying houses. Heck, some of them were having babies. And literally, what I had been doing is I had, been kindly asked by the dean at Young Harris University, Mr. Goad, you've had a banner semester. We'd like you to take the next one off. And thus for, instead of like packing up and like calling my parents with my tail between my legs, bro, I just disappeared. Houdini. I packed up a bag and disappeared for like 6 months. Mom didn't hear from me, nothing. Like total Houdini. And during that 6 months, I was drinking and using the way I wanted to drink and use. So I was living on people's couches. I was in and out of different dorm rooms all across the state of Georgia. So all my friends were like freshmen, in freshman dorms across the whole state. So like UGA, Georgia Southern, Georgia State, like all these different, big colleges. And I was just going romping around. And I get sober the first time. And then I stayed sober for about a year, but I wasn't quite 21 yet. And I had these like reservations, like maybe I'm not an alcoholic. Maybe those 2 DUIs I got already, they were just a fluke, right? They were just a fluke. I was underage. I wasn't really drunk. They had a no tolerance policy. That's why I got them. And then, I went on the marijuana maintenance program, which then led to like me drinking again. And, but it was like not drinking, like getting blackout drunk drinking. It was like, in my mind, it was like the sneaky, like, well, just get a Budweiser, just get a long neck Budweiser, and I'll never forget, I had a friend of mine pick up a 6-pack of Budweiser long necks, glass bottles, and I only drank 2 of them. Crazy, right? And I didn't burn the house down. I didn't go to jail. Like, I didn't break anything, like it went really well, and thus for the next year and a half was a total disaster. I got evicted from 3 different places. I lost countless jobs. I tried 3 geographical like changes. We're like moving to try something else out. I picked up 2 more DUIs. I picked up another charge in a blackout, and I'll never forget. It was August 6, 2007 in Columbia County Detention Center. It was like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. And literally, Josh, I had gotten out of jail 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago from sitting in jail for 6.5 months. And during that 6.5 months, I had saw 4 different facilities. Not because I had these crazy charges. It's just because I was dumb, drunk, and stupid and just like acquired these charges all over the state of Georgia, right? So I get out, and during those 3 weeks, like I try to do the right thing, and I keep falling, right? I keep falling, but then I end up back in this facility, and I just knew in the pit of my stomach, like I was just hit, and like, I came to, and it was just like, when I came to, I was like nauseated with shame and guilt and remorse, like to the point where I just wanted to vomit. Like I was that nauseated. At where I'd been. And like I was saying earlier, I was looking at, everybody else at 22 years old that was my age, like what was happening in their lives. And then I'm over here just trying to stay out of jail, right? And I knew at that point, and my parents had already like done so much, and my folks were like, we're capped out, bro. Like, we're done. Like, don't call us, you know? And I was so fortunate that I was like on my own. I was like, you know what? I got a couple options right now. I was like, I could go do the Alcoholics Anonymous thing, like I should have done before, and like do everything they said. Or my other option is go, and I'm going to live this life of like drink to drink, place to place. Like, you know, I'm probably going to end up in prison, or I'm going to die in the process, right? Because at this point, I was having friends of mine like die, you know, because of drug overdose, or they got drunk and got in a car accident. Like, all these different things were happening. So I was like, I made a decision. And it was crazy. I remember I got put into that population that they call them pods, right? For people who don't know. And I go into this pod, and I find a big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's the big print ones. They're like huge. They're like massive. And the craziest thing, there was like 6 other guys in this pod that had been in active relapse. Like, they had been sober in relapse before, and like I had some sobriety, and and my relapse just lasted 1.5 years, you know. Mm-hmm. And it was crazy how God brought those people into my life at that time. We started a little AA meeting during lunch. We would sit around and read that big book, and we would talk about it. It was crazy. And then I was met by one of my this scared me, actually. So it was like 8:00 at night. I'm mopping our pod. Everybody else has been sent to their rooms, and they're mopping the pod. I'm mopping the pod or whatnot. And then I get called over the intercom at 8:00 at night. It's not visiting time. Hours are over. I'm like, OMG, is this a detective? Is this a district attorney? What has come back and bite me? Like, I'm going through all my mind. And then I walk into this room, and it's this friend of our family who used to be a clerk, a superior clerk judge, like assistant type person. Yeah. And he can kind of go in and do everything. And he says, hey, I'm not here because anybody sent me here. I'm here because I love you. You know, and I had grown up like him and I kind of had like a father-son type relationship, and like his kids, I like babysat their kids, you know, so like I was like one of their family. He says, hey, I know about this place that you can go get sober at, that I met somebody who works there. Would you be interested? And I was like, yeah. He was like, dude, and if you call and set it up, your mom's actually agreed that she'll come bond you out and take you from this place to that place. And I was like, sold. Like, I'll do that. And he was like, but this is it for her. Like, she's not doing anything else after that. And that was the journey. It started the next day. I called Penfield Men's Christian Home. Lady answered the phone from jail, and I talked to her and told her my story. And she's, cool, Mr. Goad, we got a bed for you, but not for 32 days. So I sat for 32 days waiting to get bailed out to go to treatment. Jeez. And that thus started my journey, you know. And I went to a men's recovery home. After Penfield, you know, Penfield was 6.5 weeks at that point. So you're immersed in like 50 to 60 guys. Like, you're going through intense like therapy every day. You've got a counselor. You're in a community with other guys that are battling with the same stuff. And then, you know, I went to a recovery home up in Roswell, and that's how I ended up in Atlanta. And I lived there for 10 months. And then I moved in with somebody that was in AA, that was in recovery. And, you know, that thus far started that journey, right? And I'll never forget when I got to that house, or it was an apartment in Roswell, you know, they were like, we go to this many meetings, and the clubhouse is up the street, and you got to get a sponsor, and you got to do all these different things. And I was just kind of like, okay, cool. Luckily, there was a guy in our apartment that was like, he was kind of like, he knew everybody at the meeting. Mm-hmm. He was like Fonzie. He was like the cool guy. Mm-hmm. And he was like, hey, this guy would make a great sponsor for you. And I was like, okay. So I start talking to the guy, and it's like, he's got 1.5 years sober. He's got a car. He's enrolled in college. He lives on his own. And I'm like, who is this mythical creature? Because I certainly am not any of those. And please show me how to do that. And therefore, I got my first sponsor in Alcoholics Anonymous. And we went through everything. We went through the book. I got I stayed sober. I started telling my story in the meetings. I started chairing meetings. I became a part of the community. And then I started doing things outside of AA, like in the real world with other people, like getting a job. And, one of the reasons I got into Atlanta also was I didn't have a driver's license, I was a kid who was 22 that had 4 DUIs, so it was kind of crazy. And that was like the beginning of my journey, in recovery, was doing that.
Yeah. God, that's wild. It's just like consistent steps over time. And I kind of like he said, it wasn't one major thing that kind of like took you down this path. It was just kind of like many steps that kind of led back into that, I guess, pattern. And you've referenced your faith a good bit. Did your faith have any role in your journey in sobriety, or did that come after?
100%. God showed up in so many different ways, and I know he was like there protecting me through like certain instances and things that were happening, during my like addiction and during when I was like actively like drinking and using drugs. And, he was definitely a part of it. I never lost like my belief in Christ. Like, I was saved at a middle school camp in 6th grade, and I've always believed. But there's a difference in like believing but doing.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So what happened was, as I got into the Steps Alcoholics Anonymous, and anybody who's never been exposed to it, I suggest that anybody read the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's a wonderful piece of literature. If you've got an alcoholic in your life or you think you may have an issue with it, it's a great place to learn about alcoholism. A lot of the principles and the beliefs that are in that book come from the Book of James, which are in the Bible. So there's a lot of similarities there. So one thing I definitely learned was like, this religion was keeping me drunk because I didn't want to adhere to a bunch of rules. Right? I believed, but I felt like I had to jump through all these different hoops. And when I unpacked all those the 12 steps, and when I worked through that stuff with a sponsor, and I realized like it's all about a personal relationship with God and spirituality, and like connecting with like God the Father, Jesus Christ, and the Holy Spirit. And once I started to like piece all that stuff together, dude, it was just like electric, things started happening in my life. Like people showed up in my life. Like God sent me so many people along the way, and I feel like we have these friends and these angels that are sent to us that just like walk us like hand in hand through all kinds of stuff. It's like I look back on the 16 years that I've been sober and like all the different people that have been a part of my story and that God sent to help me, and then has sent for me to help, and it's like I hear somebody talking about something like, yep, I've done that, this is what I did, and not telling them like necessarily what to do, but like showing them like what I experienced and what I did to get out of it.
Yeah, that's awesome. You said something at the beginning, it's the difference between believing and doing, which is something that I love. And I the way I've kind of explained it to people is two ways. I like the difference between believing and following. You say doing, I say following, because people say I'm like following Christ. I love that, what that, the picture that paints. And then the difference between believing and believing in something. And like the most famous verse of all time, John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he sent his only son so that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life. And, you hear so many people today talk about, I believe, I'm a believer, which, is good. And I don't think people are, mean it just from kind of a base level perspective. But for me, when I think of like believing in something, one analogy that I heard a couple years ago is like, think about someone who says, I believe that a healthy diet, just talk like paying it to nutrition, I believe that a healthy diet is good for you if you're trying to be a healthier person, versus I believe in a healthier diet if I'm trying to be a healthier person. And the point that I'm getting at with that is like true belief inspires action. And I think kind of that's what you were saying with believing versus doing. If you truly believe something.
Well, it's also attraction rather than promotion too. You think about that in evangelical like states, like like when you look at the books that the letters that Paul wrote in the New Testament and all the things that he wrote down, you know, these were letters to encourage groups of people, right? And he was going to visit these places to show them how to live, right? Like, hey, look at my life, look at what I'm doing. These are the actions that I'm taking. And because they saw him taking these actions, they were like, what's this guy got that I didn't got? Because I want it, you know? And thus, you know, that's where the way was born, right? Before we were even deemed like a Christian, it was called the way, you know? There was no Bible yet.
Yeah.
It was just some dudes that had seen Jesus walk the earth and like literally witness it with their eyeballs, and then they're totally living differently, and people are attracted to that. You know? And the crazy thing,
the way they were living.
It's the way they were living, exactly. And you think about this, it's like Jesus made a splash so big that thousands of years later, the ripple effects are still happening. You know, like even though like it's been deemed a Hallmark, you know, holiday, but like Christmas comes around every single year, and it's the biggest birthday bash in the world, for you know. And it's like, people just think by it just happened by osmosis? Like, no, like, dude, Jesus was born and dude, grace came to earth. Like, let's go.
Yeah.
You know? But yeah, so it's that whole like attraction of the promotion, and like I've definitely been able to help and be a part of a lot of people's lives, and the fact of like in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, you know, we're not to like quote unquote like in a meeting talk about like a specific God, you know, we say higher power, but you know, if someone comes up to me and talks to me about my God, that opens the door where I can actually tell them, I can share with them my relationship with Christ, you know. And the same thing with people in the church. People in the church, I'm very open about my recovery and my life in sobriety, and I get calls from, you know, guys like you, that in your age range, you know, people that are, you know, maybe they have a friend struggling with alcoholism or addiction, or maybe they themselves are drinking too much, or it's, you know, the parent that's calling me, or it's, you know, one of the other leaders coming to me and saying, hey, I've got a student who's doing X, Y, and Z, and he's in jail right now. I'm like, yep, that was me. I got my first DUI at 17 years old. I get it. I've been there. I've done that. You know, and it's being able to share that with people in a way, you know, it attracts people to the love of Christ. You know, it's not anything that I'm saying, it's what I'm doing, right?
Yeah.
Just like what you're saying, following, doing. It's taking action on my belief system.
Yeah, I'm a huge quote guy. One of the quotes that really brings to mind, I forget the source, but it's always be preaching the gospel, but when necessary, use words.
Yeah, I love that.
Getting at the idea of like, you don't necessarily need to be, you know, in the pulpit preaching, you know, quoting scripture 24/7 in order to be preaching the gospel. You can be preaching through how you live and how you walk and how you treat others, and you know, the persona that you put off for everybody else. Like, just be an ambassador for Christ in everything that you do.
And I think about that too. Like, you take that over to business, and it's like, you know, when I'm in, you know, when somebody has hired me to help them purchase a home, you know, once they have bought the home and purchased the home, I will want them to have had a spiritual experience. You know, not because I did anything, because I allowed the God work in me and through me to help them get them into that house, right? And the same thing for a seller, you know, helping them sell their house through that process. You know, I've helped pastors, you know, buy and sell houses, where I had this one, this couple that reached out to me, African American couple, mixed family. One of the kids was actually on the spectrum, so they had a very unique situation. Literally, Josh, they've been trying to buy a house for 9 years. 9 years. And nobody would give them the time of day. And they got in touch with me somehow through a friend of mine through church, and you know, I was introduced to them, and dude, we went out, we got them approved for a loan through one of my referral partners. They were good to go there. They had some money saved, and then God provided a beautiful home, you know. And the crazy part was, like, the day of closing, you do what they call a final walkthrough, which I know that you've done that before. And we're at the final walkthrough, and before then, like, they had asked me, say, hey, can we invite some people, like, to walk through with us? I was like, sure. I did not realize what was happening, but they called all these people here to pray. So we had a prayer circle in a house before closing, and we're circled up, and it's like popcorn prayer. This isn't like one person prays over the group. Like, every single person in the room prayed from their heart out loud, and it was just like, whoa. I mean, the whole house was filled, and it was crazy. After, they get closed, a couple months later, they called me and they said, every person that comes into that house leaves full. Like, they got their cup filled for whatever they came for. And that was like such a gratifying feeling, because it's like, I didn't just sell them a house. Like, they had a spiritual experience, and there was nothing I did other than I just followed God. The point wasn't to transact. I mean, the fact of the matter was, it wasn't an expensive home. I did not make a lot of money, but dude, what I got in return was priceless.
Yeah.
I got more from that transaction spiritually than what I got financially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. That's so cool. Awesome. Well, kind of another thing I kind of want to touch on briefly is I know with a lot of your just kind of making the transition to more the health and fitness side of your journey.
Sure.
Obviously, yeah. I see a lot of the things you do. You love mountain biking. You love,
Yep.
You're into trail running. Speaking of trail running, we just hammered 11.5-mile trail race that I drug you into, and you absolutely crushed it.
Which you smoked me, by the way. Your time was like, what, an hour and 37 minutes? I was at like 2 hours, 10 minutes. So, yeah.
I didn't get to finish with my daughter, though. That was pretty sick.
Well, dude, and that's where, God, I'm going to get choked up. That's the beautiful part of what God's given me, I'm running. I'm literally having a heart-to-heart conversation with this guy about God and people who Kyle,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Who I don't know. We don't put all this together until afterwards. So the last 3 miles, I'm running with Kyle, and we're both jamming out, sharing our hearts and what we've been through with God. And it was just random. I didn't know him. This was not a spiritual race. This was this is a trail race at 11.5 miles at a state park in Georgia at a lake, right? And I'm running, and me and this guy are talking about Jesus the whole time, different stuff that he had done in our lives, and he was asking me all kinds of questions. Once he figured out that, I'd been around the block a few times, he just started, hammering me with questions, and I came up that last and final hill, and I see my little girl jumping up and down, which I didn't think they were going to be there. I had ridden with the other guys that I ran the race with, and so my wife's there with her, and she's jumping up and down. So I run up the hill, and she finishes the race with me. But it's those are the opportunities that I get, God has put me in a place to, he's trusted me to father this young girl. He's trusted me to be a husband to this young woman, he's trusted me to be involved in other people's lives like we have been, and it's just I get glimpses of that when you see that, you see a little girl who's 6 years old jumping up and down with the teddy bear she got from the Coke Museum that you took her to the day before. We had a daddy-daughter play day, and the goal was not to say no all day. She drugged me to not one, but 2 sushi spots for lunch and dinner. She drugged me to the Ferris wheel. She drugged me to the Coke Museum. And we one-wheeled on the Beltline together. So we had a very, very full day. And, obviously at the Coke Museum, we go, where does it end? It ends at the gift shop. And, I always like to get my kids, stuffies. Whenever I travel for, work conferences and stuff like that, and I go on trips, I always, I know when I was a kid, my mom used to go to conferences and stuff. And one of my favorite things was not only just her coming home, but, what kind of cool thing did I get,
Yeah.
I'll never forget, my mom brought me back a Pittsburgh Penguins hockey figure that was on a keychain.
Yeah.
And I thought that was the coolest thing, And it's I didn't know hockey. I live in Augusta, Georgia. I've never seen anybody ever play hockey. But that thing was so cool because my mom brought it to me,
Yeah.
So I always try to do that for my kids. And, whenever a little girl is looking at you with those eyes and I want the bear, I'm just you got the bear.
Love it. Well, yeah, that was that. I just remember seeing the video of that experience just as y'all kind of you cross paths with her as you were about to cross the line. So that was really cool. And, you know, you never would have gotten that experience if you didn't say yes, going back to the idea of just
That's
just
right,
saying yes.
you know, and I love that. You know, you're definitely a great inspiration, and I've definitely learned over the years when people ask you to do stuff or doing things like that, like, you just say yes. You know, when you get invited into something, you just say yes. Like, obviously know your boundaries, but like when you are in a place where the Holy Spirit is active in your judgment and, you know, your decision making, like, I know. Like, I knew when you told me you're running this race and when it was, I was like, I can do that.
Yeah.
I should do that. This would be a good thing. This would be a good thing. And it was. It was a great thing for the other 4 guys that I rode there with Lewis and Kyle and Adam, then you were with your whole F3 community as well. So it was like, it was really cool to see all the different people that kind of came together to like run that race. And we were just a small portion of that. There was like, what were like 200 people there or something like that?
250 runners, I think. So it was, like going back to the idea of community, that was just community to the max. Like, everyone had their own groups, groups were mingling, and it was just such a cool day. I love that.
But like, let's dial it back into like health and fitness, so we won't get too off topic and can get it wrapped up here. But you know, when we moved back from Montana, I was I was working with John. We had like a home office at his house, so I would go over there, I'd be on the computer all day. He would buy me lunch, and I gained like 30 pounds, like over like the course of a couple months. And it doesn't sound like a lot of weight, but it was like, it's the heaviest I'd ever weighed, you know. And I was, I'll never forget, I was just kind of like, my wife was pregnant, we had just bought our first house, she was expecting, and I just kind of had this moment, and I wasn't like being active anymore, because I was living in Montana, and I was skiing and all that, and I was doing all these different things, so I was like, I was a chill 190 pounds, like, you know, pretty fit. I didn't have a six-pack, but I didn't have a huge belly, you know, like, it was average, you know. I didn't think twice about what I ate. I ate whatever I wanted all the time. But when I moved back and I continued eating the habits that I was eating, I was gaining weight like crazy, you know. And it was going to fast food and going to get pizza for lunch and just like every single day, you know. And I got to this place where I was like, if I keep eating this way, like, I'm not going to be able to play with my kids. You know, that was kind of like what triggered me. And I like being healthy, you know, I like being active. So I kind of went on a health journey, and I had this friend in Montana who had done the bulletproof diet. And I called him. I was like, what is this? Tell me about it. Like, I'm ready, you know. And he's like, go buy the book. Call me if you have any questions. So I started reading the Bulletproof book by Dave Asprey, and I was like encouraged and like, okay, I'm going to try this. And I started doing it, and I started eating differently. I started looking at food differently. I started exercising again. I started mountain biking again, you know, because we don't have, you know, ski slopes here in Atlanta, Georgia. So, you know, I kind of go down the strip, and I lost 65 pounds in a year. And it was mainly because of diet. I wasn't going to the gym every single day, but I was going a couple days a week. I was riding my bike. I was just being active, and I was being conscious of what I was eating, right? And that was the beginning of that journey. And you know, today, you know, fast forward the tape, that was in 2019 when I started that journey. 28? No, it was when Lily was born. Yes, it was 2017 when I started that health journey. You know, today I'm back to anywhere between 185 and 190 pounds. You know, like, for example, like, we went out and ran 11 and a half miles Sunday. Like, 3 days later, I'm going to go ride my bike this afternoon with some buddies in the woods. You know, it's like,
being able to do different things, and be holistic in your approach to it.
Yeah, and then, you know, like, I had to create healthy habits when it came to eating, and I had to get realistic. I had to get honest about how I was eating. You know, I definitely stress eat. I definitely eat to, you know, feel different. You know, I definitely overeat, like, you know, at certain times, and like, I'm definitely a component of that. And I have to be careful of that, you know. It's like, but it's like, at the end of the day, I still love pizza. I'm not going to stop eating pizza, but I can certainly, you know, Monday through Friday eat differently. So like, on Saturday night when I'm with the family, we can go get pizza, and that's okay.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I've definitely gotten out of the habit of being so, like, militant with it. You know, I've definitely been more graceful with, you know, eating. But I also understand, like, the importance of it, too, because my kids are watching me now.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that's a whole nother ballgame.
Yeah, definitely. I think at the end of the day, it all boils down to just being intentional behind it. You know, you don't necessarily have to be, you know, all in and you know, super focused on having
you don't have
7 days
to do
at the gym.
75 hard.
Yeah, you don't have to do 75 hard for 365 days of the year.
Oh my gosh. Although I know guys that do.
Yeah, I do as well. And hey, I mean, for them, that's where their priority lies. I think it's all relative to what your priorities are.
I was listening to a podcast this morning. Who was it? Oh, it was Sharon Servitza, his business podcast, which he's our president at Real Broker. Amazing business podcast, by the way. But he says, I have so many friends who are jacked and broke.
That's where their priorities are.
And it's just like, I heard that this morning when I was walking the dog, and I was just like, oh, I was like, it's so true. And it's like they chose to go to the gym than to go to that call. You know, they chose to go to the gym.
Or jacked with a horrible marriage.
There's that too, right? And then there also comes the, you know, all the steroids and all the other supplements that come along with it too. And then you got the body self-image problems. There's a whole nother podcast there.
Yeah, for sure. 100%. One thing I want to dive into, which I kind of referenced in my last podcast, is I'm starting a new segment that I want to implement each podcast that's entitled Who's Taking Steps. And really, the whole point of getting off of the idea of community, I want to find ways to really build and engage the community, the Take a Step community, and really kind of grow that, because the whole mission is to, you know, inspire and build a community to take action towards reaching that potential. So one of the things I want to do through this segment is really have people send in, you know, what they've done in their life, the steps they've taken in their lives or plan to take, that really, because I think we can pick up off of and really build off of other people's stories and resonate with those stories to impact and inspire change in our own lives. So for this first segment, we have Britton Rellinger, who we both know, actually. Yep. But he said this. I'm going to read it real quick. He said, "To me, every step is imperative. Chasing down the goals I have in my faith, relationships, and career are largely a matter of many micro steps. For a long time, I thought achievements were about mustering up a large deal of strength for a moment to succeed at something. Now I'm fascinated by how small actions and small steps can compound into the goals I've set. Growing my relationship with God has never been about one moment at camp." Funny you mentioned camp. Yep. But rather walking with him daily through his word and spending time with him in his presence. Steps like kneeling before God each morning remind me of his power and his majesty and inspire me to trust him more and more each day. One step I'm looking to take in the future is setting new fitness goals for myself. I had a few large ones in this past year, like running a half marathon in under 2 hours and deadlifting 500, but recently I've been working out with no specific aim. Looking into the future, I want to set a goal that scares me a little bit and will require me to take those small steps each day to achieve that large goal for myself. So a lot to unpack there, and we like you said about that.
Definitely a lot to unpack there. You know, with Britton too. You know, we've talked about mountain biking a good bit. It's one of my favorite things to do. It's how I tell people I get the lead out, I exercise, and I connect to nature all at the same time. And if I'm doing it with another person, I connect with that person at the same time as too, right? And he actually reached out to me and was like, "Yo, I'm about to get back into mountain biking. I'm gonna buy a bike." And I was like, "Sweet, let's go!" Because it's somebody else that's gonna get added to that mountain bike community, right?
Yeah, no, I love that, and I think, and we could go on for a whole podcast just about what he said, but I think one of the main things that he referenced and hit on throughout was just the micro steps, the daily implementation, rather than the super focus on one big goal down the road. And I'm reading a great book, Atomic Habits, which most people have probably heard of.
Clear, baby.
Yeah, unbelievable. But one of the things, and I talked about it on one of my podcasts a couple podcasts ago, but just the idea of focusing on the daily implementation, the process, the step-by-step journey, because that allows you to experience fulfillment and success on a daily basis, and it doesn't delay your what you deem to be happy. If you're only happy when you reach that goal, and that goal can only be achieved in 5 months, are you just not going to be happy until you reach that goal, if you even reach it? So I think there's so much to be taken out of just understanding the step-by-step journey.
Absolutely. And it's like, when I read that book, my biggest thing was like, okay, if I want to implement, growing my YouTube channel, how do I do it, right? And it's like, how am I able to put a video out a week? And I created a system and process that was easy on me, that we've been able to do it. And we've been producing a video a week on YouTube for almost a year and a half.
Yeah, it's just consistency.
And it was all geared around, like, how do I make this easy for myself? And it was like, it's not what I know, but it's who I know, and who do I need to hire?
Yeah. And that is determined after you make the decision to get started, right?
Right.
So, yeah, I love that. Well, obviously, I've enjoyed this. One concluding question I want to ask is, like, your whole life and who you are today has been based off taking action and creating the life that you really want. And I see it. I would like to hear if you do as well. But like, I see such a problem with especially guys in my shoes, young professionals that are building their foundation, that are scared to, or something deters them from really taking action on what they're really passionate about, because it might be against the status quo. It might be against, the standard system of, you go to college, you get your degree, you start in this system, and you work your way up, which, some people need that system and structure, and there's nothing wrong with that. But what do you think keeps people from really taking action on a true passion and trying to, grow a career based on that in their lives?
Man, there's several. One, I think the devil's in the details, right? Mm-hmm. And I think ourselves and our own insecurity and our own self-worth get in the way of our success, One thing that I had to figure out for myself was, like, being comfortable with who I am. And it wasn't even being comfortable with who I am, but in order to get to that point, I had to realize whose I was. And I was a child of God and loved by the Most High, right? And once I embodied that and I realized that I have a Heavenly Father that loves me more than I could possibly imagine, it doesn't matter what I do, that allowed me the freedom to figure out who I am, right? But I have to figure out whose I am first in order to figure out who I am. And once I figured that out, I feel like that's the switch, right? I feel like that's the switch that catapults us, especially ones who are believers in Jesus and followers of Christ. I feel like that's the switch, right? But anybody else that's out there that's not a follower of Jesus, it goes back to, like, that journey of self-discovery. It's like this: once you figure out and you're content on who you are in that moment, you can move forward. But you have to get to that point.
Love that. That's awesome. Well, I've enjoyed this, Greg. I think, your perspective, your outlook, your experience, there's a lot to take away, and I think there's a lot that people will take away from it. Go ahead. I know you referenced it earlier, but where can the people find you if they want to keep up with you?
Instagram. I love Instagram at Goad Home Partners. Same on TikTok. If you want to look my YouTube stuff up, I'm Greg Goad, Best Life Atlanta. I got my website, www.goadhomepartners.com. If you know somebody that's looking to buy or sell a home and that you want somebody, or it's yourself, like, reach out. You want to figure out how we did it, reach out. You want to talk about recovery, reach out, right? If anything I said in this podcast today touched you in any kind of way and you would like to have a conversation further, reach out.
Love that. Community. It all goes back to community, building the relationships, because I think that the relationships we have determine the path that we're going to take. So I love that.
And I just want to congratulate you on what you're doing and what you're growing too, because this was a big step for you to step into this role and to, like, take hold of it and commit to, like, growing a podcast, growing a community, because you could have gone and joined 100 different communities out there, but you followed your heart and you're beginning to build something great, and you're going to invite people into it, just like I was invited when John invited me back to Atlanta. You know, it's like you're inviting people into community, right? And inviting them to be encouraged, to be loved, to be who they are and who they're meant to be.
Yeah, that's the goal. That's the goal. Well, thank you guys for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, please, give it a rating, give it a review on whichever platform you're listening. If you're watching on YouTube, which we just started at, please like, comment, subscribe, so you can continue to follow this journey and just keep up and hear amazing guests like Greg, so that we can continue to build this community so that, more lives can be impacted, and just inspired to take action. So love you guys. Greg, thanks for joining, and we'll talk to you all in the next episode.
Peace.